Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Because Tim picked so many damn questions, we've had to go back to
Hang on. That's misinformation. You picked more questions this one.
I think I might have actually.
You picked like double the questions I picked, I'm pretty sure. Anyway.
Okay, because you guys asked so many good questions, we picked a lot of them to address and ended up addressing them. So now we've blown over and we have to do a third one. So we didn't do a third one the last few months, and a lot of you guys were actually disappointed and asked for a part 3. So guess what? Part 3, Q&A for February. So we'll get into it. But before we do, today's video sponsor is Thermal Grizzly and their Cryonaut Extreme, which is now available in a 2-gram syringe. This high-performance thermal paste delivers maximum thermal conductivity thanks to an extremely small particle size and layer thickness. It's also very flexible, capable of standing up to sub-zero temperatures for extreme overclocking, but also performs exceptionally well for air and water cooling applications. So if your CPU or GPU needs repasting, then I suggest checking out the Thermal Grizzly range. Link is in the video description. There's a rumor that Zen 4 will be DDR5 only. Would that mean that AMD has to lower the prices significantly on their new CPUs in order to stay competitive? Because of course DDR5 memory is very expensive.
If they have to lower pricing, I mean, the pricing is going to be the pricing, right? But I mean, be cheaper because of supporting DDR5. It really depends when it's coming out. Like if it comes out at the end of the year, DDR5 pricing may have recovered by then. Yeah. If it comes out today, DDR5 pricing is terrible and it would have to be
if DDR5 availability and pricing doesn't recover, then they potentially would delay it.
Possibly.
Rather than reselling them. It's hard to say. But yeah, if they released it right now, as you said, it would be a disaster because DDR5 memory pricing is terrible and you would just get an Alder Lake CPU because you can go DDR4 there.
Yeah, it depends also how high end they go. Like if they do have a winning CPU that's the fastest, they could still launch that even if it supports DDR5 because that's the premium option, the best of the best, and they can charge for that. So, if it's like a 6950X type situation or 7950X, because I think it's the 7000 series, 7950X.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think they've announced that. So, I think they said at CES. Yep. So, if it's a 7950X, it's the fastest CPU, it supports DDR5. They could theoretically just launch one chip and wait for DDR5 to recover. So there's many options they have.
Well, even if the lower end chips are much faster than what we currently have, then it's worth paying a DDR5 premium. So, it depends. Crystal ball stuff.
For sure. I'm on an X570 board and I've been waiting for the 3D V-Cache chips. I was hoping they would do a 5950X version, but there is no mention of it, and with Zen 4 possibly being pushed forward, my question is, do you see them launching these V-Cache chips properly, or will they do more of a paper launch like the 3300X? Secondly, if the Zen 4 launch isn't far off, then would it even make sense to launch it at all, since the decision to create these with Zen 3 would have happened way before Intel came out so strong with their launch?
Well, I hope it won't be a paper launch. I obviously have absolutely no idea because all of that's yet to be seen. Is it pointless with Zen 4 being so close? I'd say no, because AM4 and AM5 are two different platforms. So if you have an X570 motherboard, a particularly good one, and the 5800X 3D offers quite a substantial performance uplift for gamers, and you're maybe on an older Zen 2 or Zen Plus or whatever it may be, then that's probably going to be a pretty optimal upgrade depending on pricing. There's a lot of unknowns at this point in time to answer this question, but you may not necessarily want to buy DDR5 memory, an AM5 motherboard, and then a Zen 4 CPU. But also, yes, it is late in the product cycle, and we still don't have it yet or a release date or anything in mind. So, yeah, we don't know what availability and pricing is going to look like. It's definitely going to be a niche kind of product.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it'll make a lot of sense for people already on Zen 3, like going Zen 3 to Zen 3D. Probably not going to be too much of a consideration for people. But obviously, as you say, for people who are on Zen 2, for example, you might think, instead of getting a 5800X, I'll get the 5800X 3D.
Yep.
Whereas if it was on a different platform, that's a whole different set of upgrade considerations. So it does make sense, but also I agree that I think it would be a niche product.
Yep. Yeah, and how far forward they can bring Zen 4 is hard to say because DDR5 pricing is still pretty horrible, so they wouldn't want to release straight away, but a lot of unknowns there. We'll have to see.
Okay, so in typical Ian Cuttress fashion, he's asked us a very long question.
Dr.
Which I
Ian.
Yes, Dr. Ian Cuttress.
Thank
Sorry, Ian.
I got his
Sorry,
back.
Dr. Ian. So Dr. Ian has asked us, to what extent do you feel the need to develop and cultivate relationships with individuals at the companies you cover beyond the PR? So, do you see value in going beyond finding engineers, talking to them, etc.? I'm seeing a major bifurcation between traditional written press, who go out of their way to learn more about companies and how engineers perceive their products, whereas I rarely see YouTubers wanting to make a similar effort given they can't generate explicit content out of those interactions.
Okay.
So it's an interesting industry question from Ian. I think, I do agree that, the way that a lot of written sites have worked has been more typically and historically getting more in-depth on products and discussing things with engineers. And, Ian's worked previously at Anantech, and they have done a great job of reaching out to engineers and, getting the behind-the-scenes stories on those things. Whereas I think, YouTubers, a lot of them have just make different sorts of content. Like if you look at a Linus Tech Tips or a Gamers Nexus or Hardware Unboxed, it is mostly a different sort of content to industry news.
I think it's way more consumer oriented. I find
it's either entertainment or consumer oriented.
Yeah, I find the consumer oriented stuff significantly more useful than what we saw from the bulk, and this may be controversial to say, but the bulk of traditional, let's say, tech sites where, the deep dives, the in-depth stuff, that's all cool. But I don't know how often bad products were exposed and we saw major change and things improved in the industry. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, YouTube has been responsible for improving a lot of things. Like it wasn't that long ago where, VRMs were heavily faked and it was just a whole heap of chokes or inductors, and there wasn't actually the phases there. It was just, you were led to believe there was like a 12-phase VRM and it was like 4 or something like that. And there was a lot of misleading marketing going on, and Buildzoid should be largely credited for dealing with that, and he did that. Probably blew the lid off that really in conjunction with Gamers Nexus.
And you've seen Gamers Nexus fire hazard risks, exploding power supplies, that sort of thing.
And we've worked with ASUS engineers to solve laptop problems, graphics card mounting issues. So a lot of that stuff, no cooling on GDDR6 memory. We have worked pretty closely with MSI's motherboard team, the engineers there and the people in charge there of improving their boards, which they've done a great job of since really the X570 disaster. So a lot of that stuff does go on, but we're not, it's always consumer oriented in the way we go about it.
Yeah.
So we're not so interested in the technical deep dive side of things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this question is sort of asking, is it worth, getting the opinion and perspective of companies when it comes to their products, like what the perspective of engineers, why they design things a certain way. And I think that's useful for a certain type of content, and again I think it's very much the content that a site like Anantech does, and that content is great. It's useful,
really well.
It gives you insights into the products themselves. But for a channel like Hardware Unboxed, and I don't want to speak for all YouTubers because every YouTuber does content differently.
It's very diverse.
Very diverse. But for Hardware Unboxed, the majority of our content are reviews. And the engineer's perspective on why they've done something isn't necessarily relevant. Like, especially if they've made something that's a bad product and you want to get their reason why they made it bad. It's like, well, that doesn't stop it from being bad. Like, getting their reason isn't justifying the purchase. It isn't going to make the consumer want to buy it. It's just, that's why they did that. And maybe the reason isn't even the legitimate reason.
Well, 90% of the time it's to save money.
Yeah, it's it's not a very useful...
Yeah.
So personally for me, I do find it useful to speak to people in the industry, to speak to engineers.
Very beneficial.
We try and do that as much as possible, and certainly with trade shows being less of a thing, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But then for content, it's not really the sort of content that we make. So the amount of usefulness that provides for the actual content is kind of limited. Whereas again, you go to Ian's wonderful YouTube channel, Tech Potato, and that's the core of that content. So that's really what you'd want to be doing if you were making that sort of content. And if you're a news site, for example, giving surface level news and rehashing press releases is not going to be as good as speaking to engineers and speaking to people in the industry about why the products are the way they are. So like I said, I think it really depends on the content that you're making and the way that you go about it.
Yep. All right, a Tim question. Well, what could this possibly be about? Does turning a monitor off and on degrade/damage it or reduce its lifespan? I have a habit of turning my monitors off when getting up to do something. Is it better to leave the monitor on if I'm only gone for a short time, or does it not really matter? I probably turn it off and on 8+ times a day. So maybe is this a depend type question?
Maybe. I wouldn't have. So first of all, I wouldn't have thought that power cycling a monitor would cause too many issues for that product, because it's meant to be turned on and off. Like if you turn off your PC, it's going to turn off. So, power cycling you may run into issues with like the heat cycle. So obviously you let the monitor warm up for normal operation over time. You turn it off, it cools down, and generally components don't. It's not ideal to be constantly ramping up heat, cooling it down, ramping up, cooling it down. It is of course designed for that, but the more you do it, there is a potential for risk. But the main thing I would think would degrade the monitor is actually leaving it on. And that's because one of the more likely things to degrade over time is the backlight. So if you're just leaving your monitor on at your standard brightness and the backlight's rated at 10,000, 20,000 hours or however long, you're using up part of that time by keeping it on, whereas turning it off, you're potentially extending the longevity of the backlight. Of course, that's going to depend on the monitor type and technology and everything of how long the backlight's supposed to last. I know there's been lots of improvements to make that last a very long time these days. But if it's OLED, it's a different question. It's very likely to degrade if you keep it on. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people have had monitors they've run for a decade and they still work. I know I've got some decade-old monitors that still they appear to look as good as the day I got them.
Yeah,
so probably not something you really need to worry about too much.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about either of these circumstances.
No.
Whether you turn it on or off or leave it on shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, if you've got a monitor prone to burn in, that's the only real concern that I would have. Like OLED technology, very old
Definitely
LCDs.
wouldn't leave them on, yeah.
Definitely wouldn't leave those on.
Not without a screensaver.
Everything else, most of the monitors I've used, I just leave on for a very long time, like all day, and it's been no problem. So
yeah, it's not a new technology either, like monitors.
Very mature.
Probably pretty well ironed out. And again, like some people have their monitor. How is it any different having the monitor go to sleep after 10 minutes of inactivity opposed to just flicking it off?
I'd say it's pretty similar.
Pretty
right?
similar behavior, right?
Off
so, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have like 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it may be of inactivity, turn the monitor off. Mine's an hour because, but
they're designed for that.
Yeah.
They're designed for that. And even if it was a heat cycling issue, like a monitor is only going to run at like 30 degrees, maybe 35 degrees.
It's not extreme temperatures.
Degrees. Yeah. So you may be cycling it between 20 and 35 degrees Celsius. Like that's not a big difference. We're not talking about like a CPU going from 20 to like 90, 100 degrees. So
even though they do that constantly.
Even though they do that constantly and they're completely fine doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's an issue to worry about.
Hi, Tim. I was just wondering what's the best way to go about shopping for HDMI and display cables, so probably DisplayPort cables. How can I tell which cable will support what I need it to? Maybe 4K, 120 hertz, for example. It's a bandwidth rating, right, of the cables.
Yeah, there's kind of, you should read what the description says on the product, obviously. Then, of course, there's the dodgy cables where they might say they can do one thing and actually can't do that. So it's always, it's a bit difficult. I think with DisplayPort cables, you can get certified DisplayPort cables, which are expensive, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend them to everyone because most DisplayPort cables work just fine. The certified ones obviously guarantee that they work, and they have the ones I've bought generally have been very good quality.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just don't buy from a not a reputable brand, but also don't go spending hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for cables.
Yeah, I think when you're going to like 3 meter lengths, it's more important to get a more premium cable. Let's say, I mean, I'm not suggesting you go stupid and buy like the just ridiculously expensive ones, but definitely pay a bit more attention and go for a known brand that typically makes high quality cables. Because the longer you go, the more sensitive they become.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for, if you need 8K connectivity or you're really using the maximum bandwidth of those cables, then you'd be wanting...
That'll be expensive,
you'd be wanting the proper cable support. So, there's been times when I've bought cables that have claimed, this cable is good for, the full bandwidth HDMI, and it's been kind of dodgy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just depends on the brand. And hopefully there are some reviewers out there that cover these sorts of things, and there's sort of like known brands that you can research. So yeah. Any advice for someone who's looking for a budget pre-built?
Well, I included this question because there was about 3 replies saying absolutely don't do that, don't buy them, they're garbage. And I think people confuse what pre-built means. Like, is it like a Dell Optiplex type system, or is it like a boutique builder? And there's a significant difference in what the final product is, what the pre-built system is. We mentioned it on the live stream we did the other day, where I was suggesting that, a lot of people were basically saying this is putting me off building my own computer because we had motherboard issues. Whenever we loaded XMP, the board wouldn't work even with the latest BIOS. And then we changed to a different board with the same chipset from the same manufacturer, but they'd had a more recent BIOS that addressed memory compatibility, and that worked. So basically, to diagnose the issue, we used 3 different memory sticks. We flashed 2 different boards, and then we finally got a working system at the end of the day. But if you can't afford to buy 2 separate motherboards and 3 different memory kits, then diagnosing the problem's a pain in the butt. And I'm sure many of you have had to RMA components and then wait weeks, if not months, to actually get your new computer working. So basically, to get to the first part of the question, are pre-builts bad? No, it depends. So there's a lot of boutique builders that will use all the same components we use, ASUS, Gigabyte, MSI, motherboards, the graphics cards, and even some of them like PC Case Gear, who's local here in Australia. You can select a range of parts off their website, and for a fee, they will put it together for you, install Windows, stress test it, make sure it's all working 100%, and then mail it out to you. And then if anything goes wrong, they will basically, I think, pay for it to be mailed back to them. They'll diagnose the problem and then fix it and send it back. So really good warranty service there. And if you don't want to have to go through all the stuff we went through, that's a great option. But if you're passionate about building a computer and that's part of the fun, or a big part of the fun, then obviously, you'd build them yourself. So there's no right or wrong answer.
It's a different type of shopper, isn't it?
It's down to the individual.
Yeah, someone that wants the absolute cheapest option and wants to do it themselves and is interested in the process. Pre-build is never going to be an option because it's not what you're looking for. Whereas someone that they want the PC, they don't really care about building it, and they want to get decent value, but they also want it done for them, and they want to make sure that it works straight away, is going to get value from a pre-built system. Yep. It's just a different type of thing. So.
You research the pre-built system builder and see what they offer and the quality of their systems. I keep mentioning PC Case Gear. We're not sponsored by them. They're not paying me to say that. I've got a lot of experience with their pre-built systems. They've sent a few out to me. I've had a few friends that have bought them. Someone said to me once when I was recommending them, you're not a friend if you're recommending friends go buy pre-built systems. And I don't have time to keep constantly be building systems for my friends. And frankly, they get looked after better by PC Case Gear, because they've checked the compatibility of all the components, they've made sure they work flawlessly, and
they provide a support service.
They provide a better support service than what I can provide, because I've only got so many hours in the day. So my advice would be, if the whole thing about being in PCs obviously is building it yourself and tinkering with it, and you even have fun diagnosing issues, then the answer is obvious. You wouldn't go pre-built. Someone who's on the fence and they're tossing up whether they want to build their own computer, then it's hard to say, because it is a great experience. You learn a lot from doing it. I would naturally urge you towards doing that, have the experience for yourself. But if you think it'll be too overwhelming, or if anything goes wrong, it'll be a massive headache and it would stress you out, then it may be safer just to get a good quality pre-built from a known builder.
Okay, Steve, Benchmark King. Do you guys dread benchmarking horror games? As you guys mentioned, you usually play/progress into the game to benchmark a more intensive area. Do you get scared?
Well, as far as like horror movies go and stuff, I'm not a fan of them. They don't excite or interest me in the least. I find them super dumb, boring.
Yeah, same.
I find them very lame. I don't get scared at all. Like, I couldn't care less. And the games are the same. It's like I walk around a corner and thing jumps out and goes, oh, and it's like, okay, just navigate around you and move on.
They always rely on like really cheap jump scares where you turn around, suddenly something's there, and it's like, All
I
right.
I don't get immersed in it and feel like I'm there and I'm terrified. I'm just like, yep, just some NPCs, keep walking. So, yeah, I couldn't care less. No, it doesn't bother me at all. I just want to get to a good spot to benchmark and ignore everything else. All right, we're going to hit pause there, and I'm going to make Tim say something. Say something, Tim.
Well, you said hit pause, but if this is part 3, that's actually the end of the question.
Oh.
So yes, we are done.
Unless there's a
for
part
the
4. Is there a part 4?
No, I don't think
Okay,
I don't think
no
we've got
part
enough
4.
material for the part 4.
Well, we'll stay at part 3
no,
then.
so yeah, end of the Q&A series. Yeah, if you missed part 1 and part 2, that's still up on the channel.
I've
Go
hit
check
stop.
that out. Yep, you've hit stop.
Hit stop.
Definitely. And yeah, really enjoyed this series. A lot of good questions as always. Really love the feedback that you guys give and the questions that you provide. Gives us some interesting talking points every month.
It was a good hangover Q&A session.
Yeah, definitely. After we did all that live streaming yesterday,
like
it's
6
really
hours
felt
of
like
it.
a recorded video is a bit of a breakup. But yeah, it's been good. If you are interested in asking us questions, especially for our Discord community, you want to get some priority question asking access, then we do have Patreon and Float Plane. I've got links in the description. You'll gain access to our Discord community. I know Steve's playing some BTS videos. We just did our live stream. There's lots of great stuff there if you do want to support us through those places. What else?
Don't think there's much more to say. Just thanks for watching, supporting. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.